Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high temperature in Riverside today is forecasted to reach 99.1 degrees, with a low of 71.9, so please be sure to keep cool and stay hydrated if you're heading outside. We have a packed show today. We are looking at the reasoning behind North Korea's missile launches following the reduction of joint military exercises. We will also examine why California's legislative push to require ignition interlock devices for drivers did not succeed. Plus, we will cover a variety of other stories as we close out the work week. All this and much more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning. We're following a serious flare-up on the Korean peninsula, with North Korea firing off a wave of missiles just yesterday. For the details, we're joined by reporter Ethan. Ethan, what exactly happened?
Good morning, Grace. So on August 20th, 2026, that's just yesterday, North Korea launched roughly 10 short-range ballistic missiles. The launches came from its capital region at around 5 p.m. local time, which is 800 GMT. According to the Associated Press, carried by outlets like PBS NewsHour and Hayes Post, each missile traveled about 300 kilometers, that's 185 miles, heading toward North Korea's eastern waters.
10 missiles in one barrage. How did South Korea respond?
South Korea's military immediately bolstered its surveillance posture and started coordinating information with both the United States and Japan. The Presidential National Security Council issued a formal statement urging North Korea to stop the launches right away. And across the sea, the Japanese Prime Minister's office confirmed it had detected what it called a suspected missile launch. So this rattled the whole region, not just Seoul.
Now, this didn't come out of nowhere, did it? There's been some diplomatic friction leading up to it.
That's right, Grace. This all follows a stretch of tension and what many are calling an overture from U.S. President Donald Trump. Just before the annual Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises began on Monday, August 17th, that was a few days ago, Trump ordered the Pentagon to, quote, substantially reduce, end quote, those drills. And on Wednesday, August 19th, both the U.S. and South Korean militaries confirmed the 11-day exercises were cut by roughly half, with several field training exercises canceled altogether.
That's a big change. Why did President Trump want the drills scaled back?
He gave two main reasons. The first was his, quote, good, end quote, relationship with Kim Jong-un. The second was more surprising, Grace. Trump claimed South Korea had refused to support the U.S. regarding the war in Iran. According to reports from ABC News and Al Jazeera, Trump said South Korea was, quote, not interested in helping, end quote, with the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. He alleged that when he asked for assistance, the response he got was, quote, no thank you, end quote.
I imagine that comment didn't sit well back in Seoul.
It really stirred things up. It sparked genuine political conflict inside South Korea. The opposition leader Jang Dong-hyuk criticized President Lee Jae-myung, accusing him of causing a, quote, diplomatic disaster, end quote. But President Lee has taken a more measured tone. He signaled a willingness to discuss what he called, quote, practical contribution measures, end quote, to help restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. And he described the U.S.-South Korea alliance as, quote, essential, end quote.
So Seoul's trying to smooth things over, but how did North Korea react to those drills being cut in half?
Not the way you might expect, Grace. North Korea basically dismissed it. They said cutting the drills wasn't a real gesture of good faith. Kim Yo-jong, who's the sister of Kim Jong-un, spoke out on Wednesday. She said the, quote, provocative, aggressive nature, end quote, of the drills hadn't changed at all, even with the smaller size and shorter duration.
And what about Trump's claim that Kim Jong-un was ready to talk?
She pushed back on that directly. Kim Yo-jong denied Trump's claim that Kim Jong-un had responded to any request for a conversation. That said, she left the door open just a crack. She noted that the personal relations between her brother and Trump remain, quote, excellent, end quote. Analysts read this as a signal that North Korea is holding out, waiting for bigger concessions before it returns to the negotiating table.
So it's almost a mixed message from Pyongyang. Where does that leave President Trump's hopes for a meeting?
Well, even after this missile barrage, Trump isn't backing away. He told reporters on Wednesday that he still intends to meet with Kim Jong-un sometime this year, but he was careful about the details. When asked whether he's currently exchanging letters with the North Korean leader, he declined to answer. So there's clearly something he doesn't want to reveal yet.
Ethan, this feels familiar. Haven't Trump and Kim tried this before?
They have, and that history really matters here. Their talks collapsed back in 2019. The sticking point was sanctions relief in exchange for dismantling North Korea's main nuclear complex. The two sides just couldn't agree on the terms, and the whole process fell apart. That failure still hangs over everything happening now.
And North Korea hasn't exactly stood still since then.
Not at all. Since 2019, Kim has modernized his weapons arsenals significantly. He's also expanded cooperation with Russia, which gives him new partners and new options. And crucially, he stated flatly that his nuclear program is no longer up for negotiation. So the whole starting point for any talks has shifted compared to a few years ago.
That sounds like Kim is negotiating from a much stronger position now.
Exactly right. Experts suggest Kim now holds more leverage than he did back in 2018 and 2019, and what he's likely after has changed too. Analysts believe he's seeking international recognition as a nuclear state, along with extensive sanctions relief. In return, he'd probably offer only limited denuclearization steps. That's a very different bargain than what was on the table years ago.
So when we hear Trump talk about meeting Kim this year, how realistic does that look?
It's genuinely uncertain, Grace. On one hand, both sides keep describing their personal relationship as excellent, and that's meaningful in diplomacy. On the other hand, we just saw 10 missiles fired yesterday, and Kim Yo-jong openly denied any conversation was happening. So the friendly words and the actions on the ground are pointing in very different directions right now.
What should we be watching for in the coming days and weeks?
I'd keep an eye on a few things. First, whether the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises wrap up without further escalation, since they're still ongoing. Second, how President Lee Jae-myung handles that pressure over the Strait of Hormuz, because the internal politics in Seoul are heating up. And third, any signal, even a small one, about whether Trump and Kim are actually communicating behind the scenes.
And that Strait of Hormuz dispute, that's really become a wild card in all of this.
It really has. What's striking is how a disagreement over Iran and the Strait of Hormuz has now tangled up the U.S.-South Korea military relationship. Trump linked the two directly when he ordered the drills reduced. So an issue in the Middle East is suddenly reshaping security on the Korean peninsula. It shows just how connected these global flashpoints have become.
Before we go, Ethan, big picture, how worried should people be about this missile launch?
I'd say it's a serious development, but not entirely a surprise given the tensions. These were short-range ballistic missiles landing in North Korea's eastern waters, not a direct strike on anyone. What makes it significant is the timing, coming right in the middle of these scaled-back drills and Trump's talk of a meeting. It tells us North Korea wants to be heard, and it wants leverage before any negotiations resume.
So a message wrapped inside a missile launch, essentially.
That's a good way to put it, Grace. North Korea has long used weapons tests to send political signals, and this fits that pattern. Kim appears to be saying he won't come to the table cheaply, and that cutting the drills in half simply isn't enough. The next move likely depends on whether Washington offers something bigger. For now, both sides are watching and waiting.
Ethan, thank you so much for walking us through all of this. Really helpful context on a fast-moving story.
My pleasure, Grace. We'll keep tracking it and bring you updates as they come.
That's reporter Ethan breaking down yesterday's missile launches by North Korea and the diplomatic tensions surrounding them. Stay with us. We'll have more news right after this. Welcome back. Now to a story about California's drunken driving laws and a reform effort that just hit a major roadblock. Chloe's been following this one closely. Chloe, good morning. What exactly happened here?
Good morning, Grace. So as of today, a big push to toughen California's DUI laws has been significantly undermined. A state Senate committee gutted a key part of a bill from Assemblymember Cody Petrie Norris, an Orange County Democrat. According to CalMatters and the HSJ Chronicle, that bill would have required in-car breathalyzers, called ignition interlock devices, for anyone convicted of a DUI. It was a serious expansion of who'd be covered.
So what does the law actually require right now?
Under current state law, those devices are only mandated for repeat offenders, or for people whose DUI crashes cause injury. So a first-time offender who doesn't hurt anyone typically doesn't have to install one. Petrie Norris wanted to change that. Her bill's whole purpose was to extend the requirement to thousands of first-time offenders across the state.
And that central goal, you're saying, got stripped out. How?
Right, that piece was eliminated through what people in Sacramento call hostile amendments. Those are changes made to a bill without the support or involvement of its original author. In other words, the person who wrote the legislation didn't sign off. The process was overseen by the Senate Appropriations Committee, and its chair says the amendments were approved unanimously.
Who chairs that committee?
That's Senator Sabrina Cervantes, a Democrat from the Inland Empire. She stated the amendments cleared the committee with a unanimous vote, but it's her own personal history that's really drawn scrutiny to the timing and the nature of these changes. And that's where this story gets complicated, according to both CalMatters and the HSJ Chronicle.
Complicated how? What's in her background?
Well, Cervantes was arrested on suspicion of DUI in Sacramento back in May of last year, 2025. Now, the district attorney's office declined to prosecute her after blood tests showed no drugs or alcohol in her system. So she was not charged. But she then sued the city of Sacramento and several police officers, alleging they fabricated evidence and falsely arrested her.
So her case was dropped, but she felt wronged by the whole process.
Exactly, and there's a family dimension too. Reports indicate her sister, Clarissa Cervantes, has been convicted of 2 DUIs in Southern California. And Clarissa isn't a private citizen here. She's a Riverside City Council member and an assembly candidate. So you have DUI enforcement questions touching 2 members of the same family, which is why critics are watching this so carefully.
Let's step back for a second. Why does this bill matter so much in the first place?
Because California is dealing with a genuine public safety crisis on its roads. Federal data cited by both outlets shows alcohol-related roadway deaths in the state have surged by more than 50% over the last decade. That's more than double the national increase, and every year more than 1,300 people die in California from drunken collisions.
That's a staggering number. Has anyone been digging into why it keeps climbing?
Yes, this whole trend was the focus of a 2-year CalMatters investigation. And what they found is pretty damning. They concluded that state officials and elected leaders have largely ignored the rising death toll. That inaction, they reported, has allowed dangerous drivers to stay on the road, which is exactly the gap this bill was trying to close.
And I understand families of victims were pushing hard for it.
They were. One of the most prominent advocates is Kelly Montalvo. Her 21-year-old son, Benjamin, was killed by an impaired driver back in 2020. And here's the striking part, Grace. He was killed in Senator Cervantes' own district. Montalvo recently lobbied Cervantes and other lawmakers in Sacramento, and she pointed out that many bills aimed at curbing dangerous driving have failed this session.
So if families want it, who's been standing against the mandate?
Opposition has historically come from 2 very different corners. One is the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV. The other is progressive criminal justice reform groups. The DMV has cited its aging technology and the high cost of putting this in place. The reform groups worry the requirement would unfairly penalize low-income offenders who might struggle to afford the devices.
And cost seems to be the sticking point on the committee side too, right?
That's right. Public records indicate that staff for the Senate Appropriations Committee recently raised specific concerns about the costs of the program. And remember, that's the very committee Cervantes chairs. So the official rationale for weakening the bill is financial. But given her personal history, plenty of observers are asking whether that's the whole story.
What are we hearing from the top, from the governor's office?
The response from state leadership has been pretty muted. Now, Governor Gavin Newsom had previously told lawmakers to develop, quote, a lasting program that strengthens public safety, end quote, on breathalyzer laws. But his Chief Deputy Director of Communications, Diana Crofts-Palayo, declined to comment on this specific bill. She cited the office's policy against commenting on pending legislation.
And what about legislative leadership in the Senate?
Same kind of silence, really. The office of Senate President Pro Tem Monique Liman referred all questions about the amendments straight to Senator Cervantes. So the buck keeps getting passed back to her committee. For a bill dealing with a crisis that kills more than 1,300 people a year, that lack of direct comment is notable.
Let's go back to Petrie Norris. How is she reacting to all this?
She's frustrated. Understandably, she spent 3 years trying to pass this legislation, and she described the amendment process as a, quote, black box, end quote, meaning she couldn't see how or why the key provision got pulled. To her credit, she's not throwing accusations. She stated she does not believe Cervantes' personal legal experiences influenced the decision.
So she's giving the committee the benefit of the doubt there.
She is, at least publicly. But she's not giving up on the bill either. She's currently working to re-amend the measure to try to salvage it, and she's warned about some real problems in the revised version. She said certain, quote, unintended consequences, end quote, could actually make the policy unworkable for the DMV.
Unworkable how? What's at stake if that happens?
Well, beyond just being difficult to carry out, there's money on the line. Petrie Norris noted the revised version could potentially jeopardize California's eligibility for federal highway safety funding. So a bill meant to make roads safer could, in its watered-down form, end up costing the state safety dollars. That's the irony she's trying to avoid as she reworks it.
So where does all of this leave us today?
It leaves the reform effort badly weakened, but not completely dead. The mandate for first-time offenders is gone for now, stripped out by that committee. Petrie Norris is still fighting to fix the language. Meanwhile, families like the Montalvos keep watching a session where, as they've noted, bill after bill on dangerous driving has failed. The stakes, given those death numbers, could not be higher.
Really important reporting. Chloe, thanks so much for walking us through it.
Happy to, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Things are heating up in the nation's capital as the Supreme Court weighs in on whether the Trump administration can keep the party going with the construction of a new White House ballroom. A ruling from the D.C. Circuit blocking above-ground work takes effect today, August 21, 2026, but the administration is hoping the High Court will slide in with a stay. Solicitor General D. John Sauer claims a delay is a security risk, describing the project as a military complex featuring drone-proof ceilings and sniper nests. Meanwhile, the National Trust for Historic Preservation says the project is illegal without congressional approval and that using nuclear power plant-grade concrete would be a concrete mistake. The administration is brushing off these concerns, arguing that the trust is just complaining about the building's look and lacks legal standing. To date, the project is 65% complete, with 250 workers pulling 20-hour days to build a superstructure 50,000 square feet in size, reaching 5 stories deep and 70 feet high. In financial news, the Treasury Department is doubling down on its bond buyback operations for securities, with 10 to 30-year maturities to keep borrowing costs from skyrocketing. The dollar index has been feeling the pinch, falling below 99 on Wednesday and trading around 98.8 today. Treasury Secretary Bessent is calling for higher limits on the Federal Reserve's FEMA facility to give foreign countries more dollar liquidity. However, the economy is still under pressure from higher oil prices and sweeping new sanctions against Iran, while July FOMC minutes suggest some policymakers want to raise interest rates to keep inflation from boiling over. Turning to health, the FDA has given the green light to Mflusiva, an mRNA vaccine for those 50 and older. It is 27% more effective at preventing symptoms and 50% better at stopping hospitalizations than standard shots. While it can be manufactured faster than traditional vaccines, it may come with a side of headaches, muscle aches, and fatigue. Some experts worry the immunity might fade quickly, and Moderna plans a follow-up study for seniors. If you're shopping at Wegmans, don't expect to find it, as their pharmacies will not offer it this season. In legal trouble, former Representative Eric Swalwell is facing a digital dragnet after federal agents seized his electronics at the San Francisco airport and searched his Washington home. This comes amid allegations of sexual misconduct and rape, including a case in New York City and another in Southern California. Swalwell, who resigned in April 2026, denies all allegations. Finally, in Omaha, police are getting a shock to the system as they agree to stop carrying electric shock gloves in the city's largest public school district. Students and board members say the devices create a barrier between students and officers, though the Bellevue Police and District are sticking to their guns and will continue using them. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.